Hello there, welcome to Hans Wargaming. In this video I'm going to show you how I made these small trees that can also be used as bushes. So we're going to start with some manila rope. This is 1/4 inch thick manila rope. I believe I got it at Home Depot, but I'm not quite sure. I think it's the Everbuilt brand. You're going to want to cut a couple pieces of this off, somewhere between 1 inch and 2 inches long. Put a dab of super glue on the end. I was using some accelerant here just to speed the process up. Then take the unglued side and fan it out. It's going to look a little something like this. This is a really short one, you can go a lot longer than this. It helps to have a couple different sizes so you get a wide variety of armatures. You can also break this rope down into 3 smaller ropes and then use those as individual trees. I made a few of those as well. To stain these armatures and harden them up a little bit, I made a dip using tacky glue and water and your pigment of choice. For mine, I made 2 batches with 2 different colors, a lighter and a darker brown. I soaked the armatures in this mixture, and then I spread them out on some drying racks. Here's the lighter brown that I used. So for this batch, I didn't even bother spreading the rope out until after they were soaked. That saved me a few minutes. I think that worked a lot better. And here they are. You can see I made quite a few of these. Now, I've never made these before, so I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to do them. I had a few ideas, and the first thing I tried was to glue some clump foliage on top of one of them. And I gotta say, I'm not a fan of clump foliage. It definitely has its use cases, and it's good for some things. This, not so much. So I wouldn't suggest using clump foliage for this, and you'll see later on that it's actually a lot more beneficial to use lichen, which is what I ended up using instead of the clump foliage. I would suggest using some olive or brown lichen if you can find it. Try and avoid the brighter green stuff if you can. For this part, you just want to take a bunch of lichen and just start ripping it apart into smaller pieces. If you have any nice dome-shaped pieces like this, you could just use this as just one whole piece, but I personally like the look better of torn up lichen. I think it creates a nicer layered effect. At least in my experience, most lichen doesn't come in nice dome-shaped pieces like this. Like this was pretty much the only one I could find in this entire batch. Next, we're going to glue the lichen onto the top of the armatures. And to do that, we're going to use some tacky glue thinned down with IPA. Do yourself a favor and do not thin this down with water. I don't have an exact ratio for this. I just kept adding IPA until I got a nice creamy consistency. You're really just trying to thin it down here so it won't clump up as much. Then just dip the top of the armature in the glue and layer some lichen on it. Just like that. You may want to trim some of the branches on some of these. I would say maybe like 25% of these needed trimming. It really just comes down to the shape of the armature and how you want it to look. I always try to go for a nice domed shape on the top. If it looks like a broom, it probably needs some trimming. Here's that untorn piece. I think pieces like this are better suited for making topiary bushes. After doing a few of these, I discovered that it was easier to just dip a couple of the armatures into the glue and then just stick them upside down into the pile of lichen, then adjust the lichen as needed. Towards the end, when I didn't have as much lichen left, I made a few scraggly trees. These are going to have fewer leaves on them. If you do this, I highly recommend making a few of these. You'll see why later on. I gave that tacky glue a full day to cure, and then I got to flocking. I have 3 different shades here that I'm going to use. A neutral green and a dark and a mid-tone olive green. For this part, you're just soaking the lichen in scenic cement and then covering it in flock. The scenic cement that I'm using here is a mixture of Fiebing's Resin with a few squirts of IPA. Resin is a clear acrylic sealant that I used to use when I did leatherworking. I still have quite a bit of it left over, and I've been experimenting with using it as scenic cement. So far it works pretty well. I don't know if I can say it's cheaper than using a glue mixture though. Just because of the cost alone, it's probably something that I'm not going to be using long term, but it does work. And again, I gave that a full day to dry. So at this point, I sprayed them from the top and sprinkled some lighter colored flocks on them. I think this step is optional, and if you don't really think it looks better, you definitely don't have to do it. Also, while you're doing this, you do want to try and avoid getting flock on the stem. If you do get some on there, you can easily just wipe it away. Here's a before and after with the highlight flock. I did 3 different color varieties for this batch: a forest green, a mossy mint green, and a darker, more desaturated green. And here's what these are going to look like when they're done. There's a couple different ways you can use these. If you're making terrain with foam or something similar, you can use the stem as a pin, like I'm doing here, and you don't have to push them in the whole way, you could just push them in part of the way. If you're planning on doing this and you want longer trunks, you might want to extend the rope by like an inch. One of the nice things about using lichen is that it's very sponge-like, so it is a little squishy, but it will retain its shape, and you can tear it apart and kind of re-sculpt it as needed. If you want to use these as bushes but pinning isn't an option, you can just cut the stem off. Then just add some tacky glue and smoosh it onto a base. I like to use a base for the added weight, but you wouldn't have to use one. And what I really like to do is cut the stem off just below the bush line. If you cut the stem off right about where it starts to fan out, you can do something like this. I think this would be a good way to make a briar patch. That might actually be a good topic for a future video. And of course, you can just glue the tree down, stem and all. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and maybe subscribe. Maybe even go on over to my Patreon and support me there. As always, thank you to my patrons for the support. That's it for now. Hope you have a good day, and I will see you later.